Fair Play, a novel by Pete Fisher. Chapter 36. Surf's Up. It was a bitterly cold day in late January. Martin was shivering. He was nervous as well as feeling cold. He followed Frankie, Marcus and the ladies past the large concrete barrier blocks and circular bollards disguised as flower beds. The little white reception building was flanked by a 3-metre steel fence. They were at the US consulate in Frankfurt. A military officer sat behind the bulletproof window. After presenting their ID, the electronic door clicked open to allow them entrance. They were escorted into a large waiting area. It had glass-shielded consultation counters along one side, like in a bank. Around 20 other people waited expectantly on the rows of hard seats. A water dispenser and a coffee machine were the only concessions to comfort. Martin sat clutching the sheaf of documents and forms he'd had to fill out in advance. They had to get temporary work visas for California. They were booked to play 2 festivals, in Long Beach and in San Diego. Mr. Dalgleish, booth 3. Martin approached the counter and handed over the paperwork. The official thumbed through the forms routinely. He came to the all-important question. Mr. Dalgleish, you have answered that you do have a previous conviction for a drug offence. You realise this effectively excludes you from being granted a visa? I was hoping there might be a way round it. What were you convicted of exactly? Cultivation of cannabis. I see. Take a seat, sir. I'll have to consult my colleague. Oh, thank you, sir. By now, his prison sentence ought to have been wiped. But before he moved to Germany, Martin had been busted again for a few piddly plants at the cottage in the country. Martin sat back down and waited. He was called up again to the counter. Mr. Dalgleish, you come under waiver ineligibility status. That means that you may be allowed to travel to the United States despite your conviction, but you will always need a special visa. Martin sensed a glimmer of hope. He was told it would take at least 2 weeks to process his case. He was escorted back to reception, collected his mobile, and exited via the electronic door to the street. Marcus didn't say anything when he got in the car. The others smiled and shrugged their shoulders. Tina grinned and used her Southern States drawl. It'll be just fine, y'all. Martin joined the tide of people walking down the crowded corridor tunnel that led from the 747 into the arrivals hall. LAX. A border control officer in military fatigues had a sniffer dog on a leash. He walked in the opposite direction, on the left of the column of passengers. The dog strafed the legs and hand luggage of the stream of people heading for immigration. It brushed its nose at ankle level on Martin's jeans. He joined the enormous queue at one of the immigration kiosks. He'd been granted a month-long temporary working visa like everyone else. This would not guarantee permission to enter. The decision would be made on arrival. Martin neared the kiosk with trepidation. He handed over passport and landing card when his turn came. The official took one look at Martin's special visa and picked up the phone. A minute later, a uniformed Homeland Security officer approached. His bulky holstered weapon, nightstick and handcuffs were conspicuously visible. He escorted Martin to a waiting room. A depressingly forlorn-looking array of refugees were seated on plastic chairs, waiting for their name to be called. The heavily built, bull-necked officer sitting at the desk called Martin's name. He sat silently, staring at Martin's passport photo and the visa. Martin stood in front of him, shaking. It felt like he did waiting for the cane at the headmaster's desk. The officer looked up at Martin briefly with an expression of the utmost disdain. He stamped the passport with unnecessary violence and carelessly sent it skidding across the desk. Martin deftly caught it. The officer curtly bade him a dismissive good day. Martin made swiftly for the door. At last he came out in a wide glass-fronted area overlooking the temporary parking zone where Frankie and the band were waiting. He got a round of applause, several slaps on the back and a few jibes in jest. He was so glad he'd made it. He insisted on rolling a cigarette despite the others being in a hurry and inhaled gratefully. California fell short of Martin's visions of surf, sandy beaches and the girls in the Beach Boys songs. There were indeed palm trees here and there, bending in the brisk wind. The rest was a blur of highway and high-rise. The rain was pouring down from dark, cloudy skies. It was trickling relentlessly down the van's windows. The driver fought to see ahead as the wipers struggled to cope. It was around 14 degrees outside, not exactly beach weather.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm your server for this evening. Welcome to Island's Restaurant. Would you like to order drinks now, or should I bring the menu? We have a special tonight, rotisserie chicken, marinated with herbs and spices, served with flour tortillas, sour cream, salsa, Island's coleslaw, or we recommend the Wicky Wacky chicken, which is lettuce, tomatoes, cheddar and jack cheese, red onion, jicama tossed with ranch dressing, topped with grilled chicken breast, tortilla strips, barbecue sauce and scallions. Rachel's extrovert West Coast ways were a culture shock for a bunch of reserved, introvert Northern Europeans. Hardly pausing for breath, she smiled and took the drinks orders. Almost everyone chose the draft premium beer. Rachel disappeared briefly and returned to hand out the menus. They reminded Martin of when he used to flip burgers and steaks himself, back in the days of Blues Matters. It came to his turn to order. So, what can I get you?
I'll have a pipeline burger with extra bacon, medium rare, white bun with island fries and a small Caesar, please.
We only cook medium and above.
Okay, medium then.
So, that's one pipeline extra bacon, medium white bun, island fry, small Caesar.
Yeah, thanks. Rachel circled the table, taking orders with breathtaking efficiency, then fetched a tray of drinks from the bar. The beer was certainly cold. Mac's frosty glass had a miniature iceberg floating in it instead of a head. He had to say something. Excuse me, miss. Sorry, but this beer is frozen.
Well, actually, we put the glasses in the freezer first, sir. The customers usually like it like that.
Please could I get one that isn't frozen?
Sure, I'll get you another one, sir.
Rachel was back in a flash. One beer, no ice. Before the sports arena show the next day, things were a bit tense. The local crew seemed to take a dislike to the freeloaders' techs. They were on their case from the get-go. The schedule was tight. Setting up was tense and hurried. Martin was assigned a Fender amp. It had a great distorted rock sound you couldn't turn off. The monitor wedges sounded like the speakers would blow any minute. Thankfully, the set was short and sweet. By the end, there were 5,000 or 6,000 people jumping up and down in unison to the closer. The applause would have warranted an encore. No time left. The crew hustled Frankie and the band off the stage. Martin couldn't have asked for a better welcome to the States. The other festival was in another sports arena, this time with a revolving stage. It was a novel but uncomfortable experience. The freeloaders were wheeled round just as the previous band's last chords died away. They had to begin the set whilst in motion. Martin and the others had to do their utmost not to fall over. It reminded him of the Sunday night TV show from the London Palladium when he was a kid. That evening, Martin stood with a red stripe and a roll-up on the wooden balcony outside his room at the Holiday Inn. He looked over the wet car park, the reflections of neon and palm trees rippling in the puddles. America at last.